Paula M. Kramer. I am an international best-selling author. I am an international professional speaker. I am an international TV producer, and I'm a soft skills mastermind. And I have been overcoming trauma since the day I was born. My mother stereotyped me as a threat the day I was born. She tried to kill me twice. After the attempts to kill me physically failed, she spent the rest of my childhood doing her best to kill me mentally and emotionally. My father loved me, but my narcissistic mother abused everyone in the family. So he really loved her. And he really, really loved her. And so it was hard on him to be treated the way she treated him. He would go off to his job, come home, and drink 3 quarts of beer at night to bury his feelings. He couldn't keep them buried all the time, of course. So he would occasionally go into these rages that could last hours or days. And in one of those rages, he broke my older sister's arm. So I was afraid of him. I knew he loved me because he told me I was his favorite child. Something parents shouldn't do, but it saved my sanity. And so as a child, I had to develop soft skills to make connections with people outside of my family so that I could have some sense of positivity in my life. And I took positive control in small spaces. For the first small spaces I took positive control in were my ears and my mouth. I listened to positive words I could trust. I spoke positive words others could trust, and I spoke positive words to myself. Those were my first small space successes. But I was able to create some connections outside of my family. I don't know how, because I don't remember how, but my first second grade teacher, she got married and moved away in the middle of the year, was the first adult to make me feel safe. She was the first adult I felt safe with. When then she moved away. So I lost that person who made me feel safe. Then when I was 11 years old, I said something to a principal. I don't remember what, but whatever I said, she liked a lot because she started having me come to her office for conversations. Now, how many children do you think enjoy going to the principal's office? I loved it. I remember sitting across the desk from her, having these wonderful conversations. I remember sunlight streaming through the window. I remember laughing. It was just wonderful. That was my first small space success to attract unimagined success. Because of those conversations, I have always felt equal to any person in any room. I have never felt anything close to the imposter syndrome. And imagine having that kind of confidence to go throughout life. I can approach anyone because I know I'm equal to them.
Oh,
That
well,
was
let me ask you a question in regards to that. The
sure.
reason why is because you said so much, right?
Yes.
Especially when it comes to the parents.
Yes.
You had your situation with your mother.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us have an issue either with our father, our mother, or a parental figure,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it leads to so many pain points as an adult. And before we move forward from that, we need to understand, okay, why did this happen to me? Right? And maybe you experience this as a child. Sometimes the child will think, why me? What did
Mm-hmm.
I do wrong? Did I upset them? Did I disappoint them? Am I a bad kid? Describe to us some of the thoughts that you went through when you were experiencing this type of treatment from your mother in regards to the trauma.
I had no idea why she was treating me the way she did. I just was focused on figuring out how to survive my next interaction with her. I didn't know why she tried to kill me until I was 34 years old, and the brother who was born after me told me. I was my mother's second daughter instead of her first son. He told me I was supposed to be the son. And over time, I realized that she had been raised to believe that she could prove herself a worthy woman only as the mother of a son. And it turns out she was in the same position I was in. Her parents had a baby boy first who died in infancy. The next child was my mother's older sister, my Aunt Terry, and then my mother, who was supposed to be a son. So she got similar treatment. I don't know if my grandmother tried to kill my mother, but my grandmother was paranoid schizophrenic, and she threatened her husband, my grandfather, with a butcher knife. He took it seriously enough that he left the family. And my mother and her older sister were left alone with my paranoid schizophrenic grandmother. So my mother didn't get nurtured from her mother, so she didn't know how to nurture her own children.
Did you think that she took her experiences and indirectly or directly made it your experience?
I think I think indirectly. She was very good at hiding things from herself. As after my father died, they were 16 years apart in age, so he was a lot older. So he died. She was a widow for about 9 years, and then she got married again. And she started telling people about how she had been a good mother. She had been a good mother. Well, you're not a good mother if you try to kill your baby. So she had convinced herself that whatever was in her mind about killing her baby could not possibly be true because she was a good mother. So she was very good at hiding things from herself. Any treatment she put to me from her childhood would have been an indirect thought. It wouldn't have been direct thought in her mind.
Well, we look at mothers as the epitome of nurturing,
We do.
and right? And many people
Right.
can't fathom a mother saying, I don't want to be a mother anymore. Let me end the existence of my child, especially a mother that has gone through something similar. You would either think they have what we would call like a toxic situation, right? You're either going to fight, you're going to freeze, or you're going to flight, right?
Right. Right.
It seems she wasn't able to resolve it for whatever her reasons,
She wasn't.
but she took that energy and was able to pass it down in a lot of people's ways, what they would call generational trauma, which is from
Generational
one,
trauma. Right.
right, one generation to the next to you.
Right.
As you were able to identify that, what was your state of mind when you realized, wait a minute, my mother went through this same thing. How can she do it to me?
I didn't know how she could do it to me. It took me a while to figure out she was a narcissist, which means nobody else matters, of course. And I even passed down some of it. I To survive my childhood, to survive living with the woman who tried to murder me twice, I had to separate my experiences into physical, mental, and emotional clues. I couldn't put them all together and say, Mom tried to kill me. In fact, I was a baby for both incidents, but researchers have found that babies as young as 3 months can form visual memories of trauma. We don't have words in baby brains, but we can create pictures. And I had a picture in my mind from the second murder attempt that lasted until I was able to put all those clues together and say, Mom did try to kill me. I was 42 years old when that happened. So it took me a while. And up until then, whenever I felt overwhelming, I was always stressed with all these clues about having murder memories. So when I felt the normal stress of life, I sometimes felt overwhelmed. And when I felt overwhelmed, I screamed at my daughter. She wouldn't bring friends home out of fear that I would scream at them. So it continued, not as bad, but it was traumatic for her. I was able to stop it while she was still a teenager, which is good. But it took her a while to believe that I was never going to scream at her again. So it was 3 generations.
When did you realize you're doing that, and when did you want to start fixing it?
Well, moved to my parents' house. First, I moved in. My husband died in our house. I moved into my in-laws' house. We were living near them. And then a month later, I moved out back to my parents' house, where I stayed for a year and a half. Moved back to my in-laws' house. And then when my daughter was 2.5, my husband died when she was 8 months old. When she was 2.5, we moved into our own place. And so I was alone with the responsibility of my daughter for the first time. And that's when I started screaming. And I immediately hated myself for screaming. But I didn't know how to stop it. I hated the screaming, but I didn't know how to stop it. And because people don't think mothers could possibly kill their children, part of me knew that talking about it wouldn't help. And as I got older and closer to putting all the clues together, I knew that if I did start talking about it, nobody in my family would believe me. And that's what happened. Nobody in my family believed me because my mother is so convincing. I have no contact with any family member on either side of my family, not even my father's side of the family. The only person who stayed in touch with me after I decided to walk away from my mother and then my siblings because they believed her was my Aunt Terry, my mother's older sister, who knew what my mother was capable of. She's the only one who stayed in touch until she
When
died.
you look at the only person, when you think about the only person that you're able to maintain contact with in your family was your aunt,
Right,
and when she passed away, how did
right.
that feel that that was the last connection to your family that you have?
Well, it was bad. I think I feel similar to survivors of the Holocaust who lost entire families. I understand losing an entire family because I did. Their families died. I walked away. That's the major difference. But I don't have family support. I don't have families to spend holidays with. Luckily, my daughter lives near me, so I can do holidays with her and I see my grandchildren. But I don't have any contact. And my mother was so successful at stereotyping me. She taught everyone to ignore what I said and discount what I did. This was behind her belief that she was a good mother. She taught everybody to ignore what I said and discount what I did in case I ever started talking about it. She was so good at it that as we became adults, my siblings treated me like a trespasser in their lives. And to convince my mother that I really wanted nothing to do with her ever again for the rest of my life, I told me to take me out of her will. For the time that my baby daughter and I were living with my parents, after my husband died, she took 3/4 of my Social Security income as room and board and put it into a savings account for European trips. That's what my mother was like. And money was more important than anything else. So I said, take me out of her will. But to prove to herself that she was a good mother, she kept me in her will and loved to trust. She was so good at stereotyping me to my siblings that when I found out I was in the trust, my executor brother, the God, one of my brother-in-laws called him the God because of the way my mother treated him. He didn't give me any of the details trust fund beneficiaries are supposed to have by law. They didn't even treat me equally in terms of the trust fund. I didn't get the details until I threatened to sue. That's what my mother did to our family and to my relationships with my siblings.
I find sometimes in the family dynamic, right? You love them, you hate them, everything in between.
Right,
It seems in general, a lot of people think that it doesn't matter what your family does to you, you're always supposed to love them. But if you were to take some of the behavior that certain family members do to you and you would put that behavior in a friend or an acquaintance or a stranger on the street, you would have zero tolerance for
right,
it,
right,
right? And it seems like
right,
people seem to want to easily forgive something. Was you know how your cousin is, you know how your mom is, you know how your dad is, but it's not the it's the behavior
right.
that
It's
is wrong, right? As
right,
well as when it's someone close to you, the standard is that much higher,
right,
right?
right.
Would you agree?
I agree. I agree. And people would say to me, but she's your mother. I said, but she doesn't, I would say she doesn't act like my mother. My life would be better if she were not in my life. And my life is better since I walked away from my family. It's a big sore in my life, but my life is better because I walked away. I, when I decided to end the relationship with her, I did my best to make sure I never heard her voice again because she said toxic words to me every single day of my childhood except for Christmas Day. And I never wanted to hear her voice again. I got through the last 23 years of her life without ever hearing her voice again. A major achievement in my life.
Reflecting on that, how do you feel now that you're free from what I would like to call the trauma prison? This person isn't handcuffing you anymore.
Well, I feel free to be who I am. If I wanted to maintain a relationship with any family member on either side of the family, I would have to pretend to be someone I'm not. By walking away, I can be who I am.
And who is Paula today?
Who is Paula today? I'm someone who's doing my best to make life better for as many people as I can. I reach out to people. I made a documentary in started filming in 1998, finished editing in 2007. I live in a county called Portage County, Wisconsin, that is a small county, but happens to be a hotbed of spectacular success that reaches around the world. One of the successes is the most successful and longest running renewable energy fair in the world. And I have previous to my documentary, I started college when I was 35. I didn't start college when I was 18 because my mother would have controlled where I went and what I took, and I didn't want that. So I started college when I was 35, and I took, well, I was part of three small groups, community groups and a school group, and everybody behaved badly in two of the groups, including me. And in the other group, everybody behaved better, including me. And I wanted to understand it. And in one of the really bad groups, my friend, Julie Bass, observed that we were having a terrible time with the director, but we both ended up resigning because of her. She said that instead of having one director and three staff members, we should each be a director of our own area and be equal. And that's what's got me going to write a book called From Pyramids to Circles, taking hierarchy out of small groups. That was its original title. I wrote it as an independent study project in grad school. We've been revised once and I revised it again. Shaping groups to succeed. I mean, from pyramids to circles, shaping groups to succeed. And it is true. When a group is a pyramid, everybody focuses on their own position in the pyramid. When the group is a circle, everybody focuses on the task. So I'd written this book, I'd gotten great feedback from it. When I first published it back in the mid 90s, convents were very interested in it, and I had a great response from convents. Then in the 90s, in 1990, this energy fair started. I got involved the first year because one of the organizers was a friend of mine and she asked me to volunteer. I have since been at every single fair, one of the few people. I had written this book about shaping groups to succeed. I would go to the fair and volunteer, and I did not understand the spectacular success of this fair. It was incredibly successful right from the first year. So I made a documentary to find out why. And I discovered making that documentary and then comparing that group to other spectacular success groups around the world, including Solidarity, the Underground Railroad, Toyota, Martha Stewart. Individuals can be spectacular successes. I discovered the 26 ingredients for spectacular success: financial, situational, financial, organizational, emotional, and relationship ingredients. And I realized that spectacular success comes from intentionally creating success for other people, because then they intentionally create success for you. So, since making this documentary, I have gone out of my way to create success for as many people as I can, and it's coming back to me. I One of them, the one that I might be most proud of, is I reached out to a woman in Kenya. I have two connections in Kenya. And the second connection, I reached out to a woman who was on African Facebook book group. My first Kenya connection had invited me to this group. I saw in this group a woman talk about gender stereotypes at work and how she wished she could overcome them. So I have a workshop which I teach people how to invite loyalty. Actually, I do two workshops, but there's one that's about relationships. One is about situations, one is about relationships, creating success in small spaces by taking positive control. So I reached out to her. I offered to do my workshop for free for her and then to meet afterwards once a month to help her develop her skills. She said, okay. We set up a meeting. We get to the meeting. She said, I invited a friend. I said, okay. I did the workshop. We set up a meeting for the next month. The next month, only the second woman, the friend, showed up. Her name is Rebecca. Rebecca said, I'd rather talk about personal issues. So I said, okay. We talked about her personal issues. And I gave her one piece of homework, taking positive control in a small space. I said, make one positive statement to yourself every day. The next month, she told me she had left a bad situation, had moved to Nairobi to live with her uncle, had gotten a scholarship, and had gotten a new job, and was saying positive things to anybody who checked her out in a store. 7 months later, she's still living with her uncle who travels. So she was lonely one trip of her uncle's, and she decided that if she created a non-governmental organization, she would have people to talk to and she would be able to tell them what she knew and she would be able to laugh at them. When her uncle came home, she told him what she wanted to do. He had been in the Kenyan government. He said, make a list of what you want to do. He got colleagues from the government together to help her launch her non-government organization, which the government of Kenya approved. It is Peace with Land Kenya. I helped one woman take positive control in a small space, and she gave me international influence.
Looking on that course of action from the book to the documentary to helping this person, how does that make you feel sharing that story right now?
Well, every single time I do something like that, it eases the horrors of my childhood. Every day of my life as a child, I wasn't sure if I was going to live till the end of the day. That was in the back of my mind every single day. I had lots of nightmares, lots of nightmares. So every single time I have that kind of success, small space or big space like Peace with Land Kenya, it eases the horrors of my childhood.
Are these stories that, looking back on how far you've come, did you think stories like the one you just shared would be a part of your journey?
No, I call them unimagined successes. I say that I that I've been attracting unimagined successes by using my soft skill strategies and taking positive control in small spaces. Because when you take positive control, you position yourself to attract unimagined success. When people see something they like, they reward it. So I've been getting rewards I wasn't expecting. And I even, this was more being naive than social skills, but my social skills played a part in it. I even faced down four top Chicago mobsters once and walked away alive because of who I am as a person. I did not go to college right away, so I took number of jobs. I had a couple of good jobs first, and then the second job, I could have moved from Chicago to Kansas City, but I didn't want to. So then I took whatever job I could get. I was young. I was 20, attractive. I could easily get some jobs. And I took a job as a waitress during lunch at a fancy restaurant in Chicago. I did the lunch. I I did the lunch hours. I had fun on that job. I liked that job. The maitre d' assigned me to work an evening party, an October 13th party, a Friday the 13th party in October. I was the only waitress in a room full of men. And the Chicago Bears were there, local celebrities were there, local politicians were there, businessmen were there. I was the only woman in the room. I was supposed to be the waitress. I do not remember doing a lick of work. I just remember having a lot of fun. It was the best party of my life. The week after the party, the restaurant manager came in and sat at the bar and wanted me to serve him. So I served him. And he wrote his phone number on a napkin and handed it to me and told me to call him. Well, I knew what that meant, but I wasn't going to call him. So I didn't call him. He came in a week or so later and gave me a dime and told me to call him. I didn't call him. Some days after that, I went into work and the maitre d' told me I would be serving a table of 4 top managers. I'd never seen them before. They were 4 managers, older men in fancy suits. I served them the way I always served, in the way that got me to be the only waitress at this party. Right after lunch, the maitre d' told me I was fired. It took me a few years, but I realized this was Chicago. This was a fancy restaurant. This restaurant was a laundering business, a money laundering business for the mob. And those top managers were top Chicago mobsters. Everybody in the restaurant knew I had not called that dime manager. So the top mobsters had to punish me to make sure that nobody else said no. And they had me serve them lunch so they could decide what my punishment was going to be. I'm lucky. I only got fired. They could have made me disappear that day. If I had been any other kind of personality, of mild friendliness, of social skill emphasis, I could have disappeared that day. Because the
Do you
mob,
think do you think that story, when you told me before, is a part of the reason why you're still here to tell future stories and make future impact?
right, right. I was naive because I didn't realize it in the moment that I was facing 4 top Chicago officers, but I was as friendly to them as I was to anybody, and I saw myself as equal to them because remember, I'm equal to any person in any room.
So going forward now, what type of impact do you want to continue to have in the
I,
future?
I want to change as many lives as I can. I want to change lives for children. I want to end stereotypes about anybody. I have 5 blog posts in which I've collected stereotypes over the years. Anytime I see or hear or read a stereotype, I add it to these blog posts, or I add it to the list of stereotypes waiting to be added to the blog posts. The blog posts are about women in general, people in general, workplaces, romances, ethnic, national, and racial identities, and poverty. I was poor for a long time because when I was 12 years old, a boy in school pulled my chair out from under me. I landed hard on my tailbone, and medical professionals misdiagnosed the childhood injury for 33 years. If you have children in your life, please tell them to never pull a chair out from under anyone. Some people are instantly paralyzed. I'm lucky I can walk, but 33 years of misdiagnoses left to out of place pelvis, hips, and vertebra. How do you earn money if you have that many bones out of place? So I have a blog post about stereotypes about poverty, listing stereotypes about poverty. And
A lot of people. Sorry to interrupt you, Paula, but a lot of people who suffer, it seems that income is one of the contributors, one of the pillars of their suffering, right?
Mhm.
You have people
Right,
that they don't have maybe the resources to
right,
properly take care of themselves, or they don't have the income, or they don't have the support. You find a lot of people who are in abusive situations, especially if the person's able to find the strength to pull themselves out of it, and now they may in some cases become reliant on the person that helped them to do so, and they it opens them up to being
right.
abused. Do you
Yep.
see that in the people that you assist with?
Yes, I have seen that, and Luckily, I haven't been in, well, I was in one relationship where it was dependent on his financial help for a while, but I did manage to get out of it. Although he was emotionally abusive, he wasn't physically abusive, but it can be hard. And even for men, it can be hard. Even men can be in abusive relationships. And you have to be able to set up an escape route before you leave. You have to be able to set up a place to go before you leave. He was in an abusive relationship and he had to find another job and he had to buy his own car and he had to look for an apartment before he could walk out the door. He had to set himself up. Probably was easier for a man to do that than for a woman, especially for a woman with children. Then it's much harder to leave. But luckily, there are more resources for women in those situations now. One of the problems, though, is that people don't want to believe the woman because the man can put on such a good act.
I think that's a concern that would go both ways, right? Like the abuser or the narcissist, as many people will call them, their public image is usually a very positive one,
Mhm.
whereas behind closed doors, because remember, these are people that are in a lot of ways charming, right?
Yes, my mother was
They're
charming.
exactly they're very popular in a way, they're very charismatic. They're people are easily attracted to them. Maybe I'm not talking like on a physical level, but just their personality type,
Right,
right? Like their
right.
energy. So behind closed doors is where you get the Dr. Jekyll and the Mr. Hyde, if
That's
that's a
right. Behind closed
comparison,
doors.
right?
Right, right.
So how do you help people battle that where their public image is positive or in a positive light, but behind closed doors, there's the negative light?
I tell them to start with what I did as a child, listening for positive words you can trust and speaking positive words others can trust and saying positive things to yourself. Always say positive things to yourself. If someone's constantly saying something negative to you, then you shouldn't believe them. If you're in a relationship with them and you can't get out right away, just follow whatever they say with a positive statement inside your mind to yourself. And that will help you cope with it until you can get out. You have to focus on the positive with yourself all the time, every day.
So as we look to assist people make sure that they're able to plan their escape, understand what needs to be done. But I guess most importantly, the first step is understanding what they need to do because they
Mm.
can't wait for the other person. What
Right.
advice, as we close, do you want to give to men and women who have unresolved childhood trauma and are still trying to make sure that it doesn't impact them continually in their life?
Look for any way you can ease the anxiety. I went through years of anxiety from PTSD from my childhood. One way I eased the anxiety, especially when I was home, was to move very slowly. Anxiety is a fast breathing, fast heart beating situation. Slow down as much as you can. Just slow down, maybe for just 10 minutes, but do everything very slowly for 10 minutes. I also found music. Music is transformative. I had both inside the house anxiety and outside the house anxiety. Anxiety that somehow my mother could get in and kill me inside my house. Outside the house, I thought other people could kill me because the scariest story in my childhood was the Abraham and Isaac story from the Bible. God told Abraham to kill his son. God could tell my mother to kill me. Anybody in the world could tell my mother to kill me. And that changed into, because I was a child, anybody could kill me. So inside my house, I overcame the fear of being murdered by listening to the opening and closing music To Kill a Mockingbird. In that movie, a little girl survives attempted murder. I survived attempted murder. And by listening to that music every day, I started in 2013. I am still listening to it. That anxiety eased away. So I found that, and that helped with that inside the house anxiety. The outside the house anxiety didn't end until I was 70 years old. I'm 72. close to turning 73. I could still go out in public and fear someone murdering me, because that kind of terror from those years of childhood just doesn't go away just because you think, oh, it couldn't happen because this is logical. It's emotional. It ended when I wrote about my childhood, my back injury, and my husband's death in a cooperative book, Voices of the 21st Century, Resilient Women Who Rise and Make a Difference. I wrote that book. It sold internationally, and about a month after the book came out, I realized I wasn't afraid in the world anymore, because I felt there are people who would protect me. See, it's that long lasting. I can still cry about it. I have felt safe in the world only for the last 3 years.